That's a little better. The House Committee on Oversight will come to order. Would you take attendance, Clerk?
Chair DeBoyer.
Here.
Representatives Bierlein.
Here.
Meerman.
Here.
Paquette. Cara. Bruck. Green. Regis. Shriver. Wolford. Miller. Pahutsky. Conlon. McDonald. Menser. Cerniglu. Wagella. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Minority Vice Chair Miller moves to approve the minutes of the July 22nd meeting. Hearing no objections, they are approved. Members, you have in front of you a packet involving the subpoenas that we had issued at a previous committee hearing with regard to documents from the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office has not complied with those subpoenas with the deadline as we requested from this committee. So at this time, I would move for the authorization and immediate issuance of a subpoena to Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. The subpoena would require Attorney General Dana Nessel to appear and testify before the committee on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. In addition, the subpoena would require Attorney General Nessel to produce documents on that same date that were the subject of the two previous subpoenas from this committee to the Department of Attorney General. A copy of the proposed subpoena to the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel is before each of the members of the committee along with the supporting documents. In accordance with the Oversight Committee's special rules, I state the following in support of my motion. The information being sought is necessary to the work of the committee because the two previous subpoenas from this committee to the Department of Attorney General involves criminal investigations that presented issues regarding conflicts of interest between the Department of Attorney General and the suspects of the criminal referral and criminal investigation. The Michigan House of Representatives has an interest in obtaining documents regarding these closed investigations as the House examines and debates whether to enact legislation addressing how conflicts of interest such as this should be regulated by statutory law. Furthermore, the House has the ability to impeach civil officers of the state of Michigan where corrupt conduct in office occurs. In order to faithfully exercise its responsibilities in this regard, the House is entitled to investigate the Department of Attorney General's decision to decline issuing criminal charges in these matters, which involved either a family member of the Attorney General or a high-ranking officer of a major political party of this state. Previous efforts made to obtain the information being sought are as follows. On July 22nd, 2025, this committee voted 15-0 to authorize a document subpoena to the Department of Attorney General for documents regarding a criminal referral from the Michigan Department of State for an alleged violation of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act by an organization called Bipartisan Solutions and an investigation into potential criminal activity regarding that referral. Also on July 22nd, 2025, this committee voted 17-0 to authorize a document subpoena to the Attorney General for documents regarding an investigation into potential criminal activity by an individual named Tracy Kornack. These two subpoenas required the production of documents by August 5th, 2025. The Department of Attorney General has stated that both of the referenced investigations are closed. However, the department has failed and or refused to produce the subpoenaed documents despite having had 5 weeks to gather and produce those documents. Furthermore, the department has refused to identify a date on which the documents will be produced, stating only that the issues referenced in the Oversight Committee subpoenas aren't very important. Meanwhile, the Chief Legal Counsel for the Department of Attorney General refuses to even take a telephone call from the House General Counsel to discuss the department's intentions with regard to the subpoenas. It appears that the Department of Attorney General is repeatedly stonewalling the Michigan House of Representatives as its Oversight Committee seeks to investigate these important issues. The party to be subpoenaed is the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. The subpoena is for the witness to appear and testify before this committee on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. The subject of the testimony will include inquiry into why the Department of Attorney General is failing and or refusing to comply with the subpoenas previously issued by this committee. In addition, the subpoena will direct Attorney General Nessel to produce the documents listed on the two subpoenas previously sent to the Department of Attorney General. With that, I move for the authorization and immediate issuance of a subpoena to Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel to appear and testify before the committee on September 16th, 2025, and to produce the listed documents. Minority Vice Chair Miller.
May I speak?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go.
Chairman, when the committee voted 15-0 with 2 passes, almost unanimously, no one was against it, what steps were taken to formally transmit that request to the Attorney General's office? And what happened, and what happens if they produce those documents before September 16th? Has the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General, given the committee any written explanation for the delay providing these documents? And at what point does this committee believe it has exhausted good faith efforts before moving to subpoena? It says here that they were served on July 22nd, I believe, but prior to that, I know you had asked, this committee had asked for documents prior to that. So what's the realistic timeline for the committee to receive these documents?
Well, I mean, great question. They accepted service. They were fully aware of it immediately, that what we were requesting. The communication, I think we did receive an initial response back from them on the request without a date to which they would have it. And just for example, to the committee, other subpoenas that we have issued, when there was a circumstance that perhaps because of the nature of what was asked for, it may take longer than the deadline, that communication is usually provided to us. There's a discussion had, there's an explanation, and we've acquiesced to that. We've acquiesced to that in the case of the subpoenas to the Department of Natural Resources. They explained why. We said, makes sense. Well, we didn't even get that from them. It was basically, we'll get them to you when we get them to you. We have lots of important stuff to do that's more important than what you're asking for, and we'll get them to you when we get them to you. House Counsel Andrew Fink made an attempt to communicate with them on numerous occasions, making phone calls, and they would not call him back and have a phone conversation with him. So, which all of those behaviors is what has led to us as a committee preparing to issue potentially the subpoena.
Did they
Excuse me, the
give you
subpoena.
anything
No,
part of it? Nothing? Okay.
no. Yeah, you do have in your packet there further information with regard to their communication to us. You have the copies of the letters there for you to review. So that, yeah, that's what's got us to here is, you know, they may perceive that their stuff is more important. Hey, we may even agree that some of it is, but the communication has to happen. And when the communication doesn't happen, it essentially invalidates everything we're doing here. Regardless of our positions on things, it invalidates what we're doing, and I think that that's a disservice
Right.
to the
And
institution.
even if it's in the packet, the public might not know that.
Correct. Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Great point.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Minority Vice Chair. Representative Cerniglu.
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarification, I think I had kind of heard that the investigation may have been referred to the Secretary of State's office rather than the Attorney General. Is that accurate?
It
or-
was actually referred from the Secretary of State's office to the Attorney General's office. So as you're aware, I know you are aware, they look into the campaign finance sides of things.
Right.
And in this particular case, the way I understand it, at least based on what I know and have read, is that the Secretary of State's office did their investigation. They made a determination that there possibly was some criminal activity there, although they're not a criminal activity investigating agency. But they do that on a regular basis. And they referred that case to the Attorney General's office because of their belief that there could have been criminal activity that occurred. And so that case went to the Attorney General's office, and to the best of my knowledge, it resided there for some period of time. And it frankly wasn't until we issued these subpoenas that I was aware that the case had been closed. So there was no position statement, no public statement was made that that case had been closed. It wasn't until we made this request that we even found out that the case had been closed.
So it hasn't been referred back or
No, it has not.
deferred to another agency? Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, thank you.
And then it looks like that originally they were given about 2 weeks, and then they responded that they needed some additional time for redactions, for client, attorney-client privilege, which does seem reasonable to me, and that they would have, that it would involve potentially hundreds of documents. Is that your understanding as well, that it might involve that many documents?
It could, we don't know that, but it theoretically could, yes. And I completely am in line with where you're at on that. The issue to me is that the lack of communication afterwards. As I mentioned, other departments have been very forthright about, hey, this is how long it's going to take, give us to this time. We're now 5 weeks, right? So when you don't hear from them and you try to communicate with them and you call them and they won't engage in a phone conversation, at some point,
So what you would be looking for here would be more of an estimated date, so that you could then consider it
that would be a
reasonable
great thing to start, yes.
or unreasonable. Yeah, because it definitely looks like there was just some back and forth, we need this now, you can't have this now because it's not ready, and
Right.
all of that going on. But okay, thank you.
Great
That
questions.
helps.
Thank you. Representative Wagala.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I think this might have been kind of addressed, but I just, obviously, I think we should be provided documents. My question is, have we requested or invited the AG to come testify before subpoena anything too? And maybe the assumption is if we're not getting the documents,
Sure.
that wouldn't happen. I just would like to know if we.
Yeah,
have that request.
I don't know that we directly just said, hey, would you come and testify? And I would say that the reason for that is because we do have these two subpoena issues that haven't been unresolved. They're unresolved at this time. Unresolved to the point that there hasn't even been a good faith effort by them to say, hey, we'll have them to you by, September 15th, right? That hasn't occurred. So I just believe that requiring the Attorney General to come here and testify is a little more, has a little more substance because of the outstanding subpoenas. I would agree with you if we just wanted to ask some questions, that the right way to go about it would be to just send them a letter and say, hey, you want to come in and talk to us? But that isn't really what the case is. This is more about the reaction to our subpoena that we issued. So, thanks, Representative. Yeah, Representative Miller.
Just one follow-up. I want to go back. What happens if they produce documents prior to the September 16th?
Well, we always have the ability and right to withdraw the subpoena if we choose to do that, for sure.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, seeing no further discussion on that motion to subpoena Attorney General Dana Nessel to appear, testify, and produce those records, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
On the motion for the committee to authorize the chair to execute a subpoena to Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, Chair DeBoyer,
Yes.
Representatives Bierlein,
Yes.
Meerman,
Yes.
Paquette, Cara, Bruck, Green, Regas, Shriver, Wolford, Miller,
Yes.
Pahutsky, Conlon, McDonald, Menser, Cerniglu, Wagella. That was a pass? Yes,
Yes.
sorry. Mr. Chair, you have 17 yeas, 0 nays, 0 pass. The motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on, what we're going to do today is we're just going to have some updates from our subcommittee chairs, presentations on some of the things they've been working through, just so we all have a broader understanding of what each of those subcommittees are doing moving forward, because not all of us are on all of those subcommittees, and I think it'll be a very informative thing. I do have a request of the subcommittee chairs. As you know, we are on a time restriction. I am going to run a clock. I would ask that you do it in 10 minutes or less on your update to us. That'll provide members the opportunity to ask some questions on their update afterwards, if it's so desired. And we will try to get through this, and my goal is for us to be done at the very latest at 10:30, and hopefully before that. So with that, I am going to go to Representative Merriman, Child Welfare System Subcommittee. Representative Merriman, if you will.
I can give it from right here.
If,
Fine.
if whatever you're comfortable with, if right there is perfectly fine.
I appreciate this, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the committee and to the state of Michigan about what we've been doing. I guess I want to start out by saying, if you had asked me 8 or 10 months ago, this is what I would be doing, I wouldn't have been on my radar. My wife and I did do foster care ourselves for 8 years, and it's been part of my world here in the State House since I've been here, but not a real focus. And honestly, it's hard, as you'll hear from some of my testimony. But I'm grateful to do it, and we will continue on as best we can as a committee to speak for those kids. You know, many of them will never stand in front of us, but it's our responsibility here in the state legislature to do what we can for them. So we started, our first hearing was for the Center of the Rights of Abused Children, and this is a national group. Bradley Gilbreth talked to us, and he talked about the idea that, you know, we should look at how kids are represented by their attorney and kind of what that attorney is there, who that attorney is really working for. I'll read off some statistics and then we'll get into the second hearing. In the state of Michigan, the foster care system, Michigan reported 35 child maltreatment fatalities, 2.04 per 100,000 children, 29th in the nation. About 10% of the youth will re-enter foster care at least once. That's 19th in the nation. The average time in care is 28.8 months. More than 25% will spend 3 or more years in care, above the national average of 22 months. 18% respectively. 45% of the children in care longer than 2 years will move at least 3 times. Michigan is among the lowest 10 in the nation. 14% age out of foster care and into adulthood without a permanent home, compared to 9% nationally. So all of those statistics say we have a lot of room to grow. These are kids that are struggling, and we're not doing as well as we should as a state. Second hearing was the Auditor General, looking at the Auditor General's report concerning CPS. We've heard from 2 people from the Auditor General's office and also Demetrius Starling. I think what stood out to me here was the 17 material conditions. Often when we look over the Auditor General's reports in other auditor reports in other places throughout the state and other departments, often the department agrees. In this case, the department did not agree in most of these 17 findings. Number 1, commencement of CPS investigation. MDHHS did not appropriately commence 17% of reviewed investigations within a 24-hour period. That's a statute. Central registry clearances. MDHHS lowered its standards for central registry clearances to satisfy metrics. Criminal history checks. This is finding 3. Investigators did not complete criminal history checks for over 50% of investigations reviewed. CPS history checks. MDHHS did not support that investigators had conducted a complete CPS history review for family members and households. So criminal history checks, 40% of investigations reviewed weren't completed. The ineffective supervisory review of investigations contributed to broad deficiencies. This is within the department. They're not looking at what is going on within their own department. I think it's very important to note that there was a public statements by Director Hertel saying that this Auditor General's report was unethical and biased, which I'm not sure has ever happened before. Next hearing I'll just cover three things. Communications with mandatory reporters. MDHHS adopted a less restrictive policy. This is a Auditor General's finding that the department adopted less restrictive policies, and in nearly 70% of investigations, MDHHS could not support that it provided mandatory reporters with written notification. So just not following through with these people coming forward saying there's abuse going on. Safety planning and assessments, 33% of the time, MDHHS could not support the initial safety planning that had occurred or that it was needed. So that's the plan for these kids to go home, this plan for these kids to be safe. Monitoring category 3 families in participation with investigative searches. So MDHHS did not monitor nearly 22,000 investigations that could not determine whether or not the families received and participated in these services. Again, trying to follow these kids and make sure that there is supports being given and that the plan is being followed to help these kids succeed in life. Hearing 4, we heard from a sheriff in Monroe County, Troy Goodnow, and a trial attorney, Sheriff Goodnow, Goodenough, talked about a situation that he had in his district that went on for almost a year, and the frustration that he had with his interaction with CPS and their really inaction on behalf of children that were living in a tent in the middle of the winter. And it took him threatening a press conference for there to be action in order to give this family the support they needed. The attorney talked about a case where a boy was abused and eventually killed, and CPS had signed off on that placement of, or keeping that son with her mother, and again, like the mother killed the son. As you can imagine, hard hearings to have, but again, very, very important that we here make sure that if the state is getting involved, we're doing a good job. Hearing 5, we focused on CCI, child caring institutions. We heard from Kathy Prudhomme, Eagle Village, Dan Gowdy, Wedgwood, Stacy Bowen, Spectrum Humana. From December 20 to May 2025, we went from 1,200 placements. These are placements where kids go when all else has failed and treatment they need. This is the last resort treatment these kids can find. And the beds went from 1,200 to 423, and even this year we have lost 100 beds. I think the thing to take away from that hearing is that especially has ripple effects throughout the foster care system, throughout the child caring institutions, that is just magnifying problems in other areas. Hearing 6, we heard from Brandy Morley Poles, mother of a son murdered by his father after law enforcement became involved in a custody arrangement. And we also heard from Molly Dixon, the mother of an adoptive son with severe behavioral challenges. And she ended up being told by people in the state that you need to abandon your child at the hospital in order for this child to get help. This is not a lone story. This has happened to other people, and the outcomes have been even worse in some of the other stories. The point is that this mother could not find help for her child. The hearing 7, the closure of Shawano Center in Grayling. We heard from the Roscommon County prosecutor. We heard from the Roscommon County juvenile referee. We heard from Otsego County administrator. With this closure, the Schwamel facility in Grayling left the court officials without a facility to send male juveniles until a new facility opens, which, by the way, we don't have a timeline on yet. We have asked the department for. MDHHS has planned to relocate services. But we're still waiting. And so these people came in and testified in front of us saying they're left with putting these kids either in dangerous situations or putting them out in the street without the care they need. Hearing 8, we heard from a grandmother who was begging CPS to intervene, and her grandchild was killed by the grandchild's mother and boyfriend. Again, documented awareness that CPS had. Decision was wrong. Hearing number 9, our last one so far, Auditor General report 150 deaths not investigated by Children's Protective Services Office of Family Advocate. They're supposed to investigate these deaths of children if they had an interaction with CPS in the last 2 years. And this had gone on since 2022. There hadn't been a report. So it's part of how I think CPS, this report in particular, is how CPS can monitor how things are going and if there's something they could do in a child's death. And sometimes it has nothing to do with them. Sometimes it's Sid's death or something else that's natural. But if there's something our Child Protective Services can learn, it would be in this report. And the idea that the department decided they didn't need to investigate these children's deaths, it's statute. They're supposed to give us a report and they haven't. I want to end by saying this is never going to be an easy place for anyone to operate in, and I appreciate so many of the CPS workers and people throughout MDHHS and their efforts to do their best job. But in my mind, we have some pretty glaring problems here that we need to address as soon as we can. And we will keep pushing. I had a great conversation with somebody from the UP offering to bring a judge down and another prosecutor and a former CPS worker, and they want to come in and testify about really kind of their desperation they see around them and how we're not protecting kids as we should. So we will keep going, Mr. Chair, and we'll keep giving recommendations.
Thank you, Representative Merriman. That is a tough committee, I'm sure, to have to sit through some of that testimony. I appreciate your work on that. Look forward to, at some point, I would guess, maybe some policy recommendations. We do have a couple quick questions, I think. Representative Miller.
Yes. Thank you, Representative, for being a foster parent. That cannot be an easy thing to do by any means. I wanted to ask you, are there best practices from other states you're considering recommending?
We're looking at other states and how they're licensing their, for instance, child care institutions. I think there needs to be different levels of licensing than we have. The child care institution, this is a residential placement where a child is placed in for maybe 3 months or so, maybe longer. They're full-time there, they're living full-time there, and they're actually licensed as a daycare center. So we just need different levels of licensing, and it would give the licensee, I think, more clarity on sort of how they can best help that child.
Thank you for your work.
Representative Menser.
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. So Director Hertel didn't come into this position until 2021. This audit is from 2018, so I'm having a hard time understanding how she has, how she can defend an audit that she wasn't even part of. So a couple of questions here. Are we ordering or can we order a more recent audit?
the 2018, and then we had a follow-up audit, which was a lot more recently, and I'm looking for that deadline. And I would say, in answer to that, the audit came up to more recently, so it kind of audited a range of years. To me, it's telling how the director reacted to the audit instead of saying, these are conditions that we want to work on as well. She suggested the audit was unethical and biased. So to me, that doesn't seem like there's an interest there to kind of collaborate to work on these issues.
And your statistics, your findings were really kind of horrific. When were those statistics compiled? I mean, what years are they from?
I'd have to check in on that. I think you're referring to our hearing one?
Yes.
Yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I think that when we look at this, we really need a new audit. We need a fresh audit. And that way we can hold Director Hertel's feet to the fire, because the deficiencies in it will be under her name, not some previous director.
The audit with the 150 uninvestigated child deaths was under her
Okay.
time, for sure. And I would say this audit, the 2018 audit, went through her time as well, although it started before, to your point.
Thank you, representatives. I would agree, though, perhaps the Oversight Committee should make a request to do an audit to that degree. So that's actually a great idea. And Representative Menzer, let's talk about that, I guess,
Okay.
further. Yeah, thank you. Representative Cerniglu?
Thank you. So it's certainly been a long time, over 10 years since I've, had interactions, with CPS, professionally, and working with families, who were impacted. But at the time, it seemed to me that there was an extreme lack of resources for doing all of these things that are very important for us to be doing. So I guess my question lies in that space. Are we, willing to look into, additional funding for CPS and the MDHHS so that they can do all of these things that are so important for Michigan children? And do you anticipate that there will be adequate funds allocated in the budget that's presented?
I would say that this department in particular is one of the ones that has gotten the most increases. And we're looking into that, frankly. How much resources are there and divided out per child. I think what we need to be careful of is that we're not building overhead. And in some cases, we have seen a couple layers added into the DHHS system, and I don't think that money then gets down to the kids. I agree that it's very important that the resources are there.
Thank you. I would be interested in more information and follow-up on whether or not we have adequate resources, because I agree there could be an issue with overhead, but it would be good to get more information. Thank you.
Great questions, Representative Cerniglu. Thank you for that. So we are going to move. I'm going to remind everybody we are on a time constraint. Be as brief as possible, and that'll give us an opportunity to ask some additional questions. We're going to move to Representative Regas, the weaponization of state government. Representative Regas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. It's a privilege to present what we have done so far in state weaponization. So the purpose of this committee was clear: to investigate and expose the misuse of government power. Over the past several months, we've heard credible, consistent testimony pointing to a disturbing pattern of state agencies and public officials using their authority not to serve the public, but to intimidate, silence, and punish people. What we've discovered is not isolated or accidental. It reflects a broader failure of leadership and a disregard for the principles of fairness, due process, and equal treatment under the law. When government agencies act based on politics instead of policy, or retaliate against citizens for exercising their rights, that is the weaponization of government. This committee was created to confront that abuse head-on, and that is exactly what we've been doing. Our first committee hearing was Attorney General and the Flint water crisis. Former Attorney Generals Bill Schuette and Mike Cox testified about the politicalization of the Attorney General's office under Dana Nessel. Both expressed deep concern over her handling of the Flint water crisis, particularly the dismantling of the prosecution team, dismantle of charges, and public statements made during ongoing litigation. These actions didn't just derail one of the most critical accountability efforts in our state's history, but sent a message that political calculation takes precedence over justice. This committee has subpoenaed the Attorney General's office for its internal financial records related to those decisions. The families of Flint and the people of Michigan deserve full transparency. We also held a hearing on the COVID crackdowns and government overreach. And it's no secret that the COVID lockdowns and abuse of power is why I am here today. We heard testimony from small businesses who were aggressively targeted during the COVID-19 shutdowns. Carl Mankey, the barber in Owasso, was fined $10,000 and stripped of his licenses simply for continuing to work. He spent over $90,000 defending himself in court, and his license was suspended without a hearing as well. Marlena Hackney, a restaurant owner, had her food license revoked, was jailed for 4 days, and faced over $70,000 in legal fees. Her attorney presented emails from the Attorney General's office showing efforts to forum shop and push for the harshest punishment possible, all while the health department officials ignored court orders. Some of those emails also referenced her airing on the Tucker Carlson show, and to make sure that she had been arrested before that show had aired or had been recorded. These cases were not examples of measured public and health enforcement. They were political retaliation, plain and simple. The DNR targeting of wildlife, rehab, and farmers, the Department of Natural Resources, has also been a focus of serious concern. In fact, up to 90% of all of the complaints that we have received as a committee have pertained and involved the DNR. Dr. Christy LaBounty, and she operates a licensed wildlife rehabilitation center, has faced repeated legal actions, permit threats, and ongoing harassment following a 2018 Facebook post criticizing animal cruelty. Despite clean inspections from both USDA and state regulators, she had been charged multiple times and has now spent over $100,000 defending herself, simply because the DNR did not understand what a soft release meant. They did charge her with baiting, and it was a soft release. So you think that the government agency would know the difference. We also heard from Senator McBroom, Dr. Winger, and farmer Roger Turninen, who described how the DNR used vague definitions over the 2010 invasive species order to label heritage pig breeds as illegal. Heritage pig breeds. Farmers were focused to destroy their livestock or risk prosecution with no clear standards and no due process. Representative Preston shared a particularly alarming account that DNR officials conducted an undercover operation using false identities to enter a farm under the guise of hunting pigs, only to later use that information to initiate enforcement actions. The committee had issued a subpoena to the Department of Natural Resources for records concerning feral pigs and Canadian geese to ensure transparency and holding agencies accountable. These aren't isolated events. They form a pattern of heavy-handed enforcement, targeting individuals who had spoke up or challenged the system. So I know firsthand that what it means to be a victim of government weaponization. I've lived it. I've felt the weight of state power used unfairly and without cause. And I have made a commitment that if given the chance, I would make sure that no one else would have to go through it alone. That's why I chair this committee, to hold those in power accountable, to give the voice to the voiceless, and to shine a light on abuse where others would have looked away. We will not be intimidated, we will not be silenced, and we will continue doing the work of the people Michigan sent us here to do.
Thank you, Representative Regas. Anybody have a question, concern? appreciate your work on this, appreciate you looking out for the interest of the people of the state of Michigan against a structure that's $82 billion strong and really can do anything it wants. I appreciate you standing up for the rights of the citizen and taxpayer. So thank you for that, Representative Regas.
Thank you.
We're going to move to Representative Wolford, State and Local Public Assistance Program Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. What we're talking about today is accountability. I'm blessed and fortunate to be the chair of Oversight Committee, and I'm tasked with a critical mission, as all of us are, and that is to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse. And in those two areas that I've been looking are the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Unemployment Agency. Our findings thus far reveal troubling instances of mismanagement, squandered resources, and in some cases, outright theft of public funds. These are not just numbers on a ledger. They represent hard-earned dollars of Michigan taxpayers who deserve accountability, transparency, and reasonable stewardship. We owe it to every citizen to ensure their trust is not betrayed. I assure you, our work has only begun, and today I'll provide a brief update on our findings as we continue this vital pursuit of justice and reform. Here are the facts. Michigan continues to rely heavily on self-attestation when processing applications. In other words, people can simply check a box saying that they are eligible, and in most cases, that is enough to start receiving benefits. There's only 4 pieces of information that are required: a first name, last name, an address, and an alien number, only if that person self-identifies as a non-citizen. No social security number is required, even if someone claims to be a citizen. I brought MDHHS before our committee. We pulled up the website for benefits. We went through all 27 pages, and at the end, we're given the opportunity to register to vote. Instead of front-end verification, MDHHS leans almost entirely on phone interviews after the fact. We spend millions of dollars on websites. We see this as a reoccurring theme. They don't work. But home visits are their next stop, or in-person interviews, which are practically non-existent. And while MDHHS tells us that this is because of federal regulations, I can assure you today that's misleading. The federal rules actually require verification of social security numbers, residency, and identity. The truth is, the state has wide discretion to ask for additional verification. However, MDHHS has simply chosen not to exercise this authority. The lack of verification has real-world consequences, and we've seen this. When you leave the door wide open to fraud, fraud will walk in. We have seen it with the Unemployment Agency, where fraudulent claims ran into the billions, over $10 billion and counting, during the pandemic because the state looked the other way. The same weak safeguards exist in our assistance programs today, and that must stop. And as a result, it has been predictable. Michigan's SNAP payment error rate under Governor Whitmer has averaged 10%. That error rate puts us among the worst in the nation. And by comparison, the national average hovers around 6%. That gap is not by accident. It is a symptom of a broken system. And here is the danger. Under the federal law, when the state error rate remains that high, Washington is going to hit us this year, hit Michigan with a $300 million or more fine. And that's not just a number that's on a balance sheet. That is money that we will not be able to use for schools, roads, or for families who actually qualify for help. Think about that. $300 million is almost the entire annual budget for the judiciary in Michigan. Imagine walking into your district and explaining to taxpayers that they lost that kind of money because the state of Michigan could not be bothered to verify who was getting benefits. So why is this important? This is not about denying help to those in need. Let me be clear, no one wants to take food out of the mouths of families who truly deserve it. This accountability will ensure that they have food and they have the benefits they need. When benefits are handed out without verification, it invites fraud, it undermines public trust, and drains resources away from the families who actually need it. If taxpayers are expected to fund these programs, then they deserve the assurance that their money is being used responsibly. We already know what happens when verification is ignored. During the pandemic, criminals, not families, not workers, but criminals, figured out a way to exploit the UIA system. They used stolen identities, fake names, and even out-of-state addresses to put billions of Michigan's unemployment trust funds in their pocket. They used the same skimmer technology and identity theft tactics that we now see being used in bridge cards. In some cases, investigators found cards in apartments with dozens of stolen cards at a time, which you see on the projector ahead. If fraudsters are willing to do this with UIA and bridge cards, it makes me think they'll do the same with other government programs. And when the state is handing out benefits with no verification, this is tragic. We cannot keep repeating the same mistake and expecting a different result. Our government is out of control. Oversight's about shining a light on broken systems, holding agencies accountable and protecting both taxpayers and families who depend on these programs. Michigan can do much better, and it starts with eliminating self-attestation, requiring proper verification on Social Security numbers, identity, and residency, and enforcing the rules that already exist. It also means putting agency leadership on notice that high error rates and wasted dollars are no longer going to be tolerated. This committee has a responsibility to make sure that taxpayer money is used for intended purposes and make sure that struggling families are not shoved aside because of waste, fraud, and abuse. And then I want to just encapsulate this in closing. We have MDHHS, who with the OIG has stated that there are at a minimum of $200 million a year that's being wasted because 2011, 2013, we could have put chip cards into these bridge cards and saved the taxpayers now nearly $3 billion. Also, during COVID, we know that of the $40 billion that was given to the state of Michigan, $10 billion of it was wasted. That came from Deloitte, who ironically was also given a $55 million contract from the administration to build a new website. And so I say all that to say we've got real waste, real fraud, and we are going to get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Wolford. You said 200 million. Is that because the chip card, that's 200 million annually?
It's 200 million annually, and Chair, because our error rate is now at 10%, with the new rules from the federal government, next year we will start paying 300 million back to the federal government because we don't know how to, not we, the administration does not know how to properly administer these programs and do it efficiently.
So between the potential fine and the 200 million of fraud that can be prevented just by moving to a chip card, you're talking about $500 million annually?
Yes, sir.
Now imagine if that money was available to go to the families and the kids that are in need, truly in need, and that's amazing.
That's exactly.
Those are unbelievable numbers.
Yes, and those are
$10 billion also on the unemployment agency?
10 billion and counting, more to come.
Amazing. Representative Cernigu.
Thank you. I have just a couple things and then a question here. Thank you, Chair Wolford, and yes, Wolford. Sorry, I think I must be mumbling today. I sounded like a pass earlier. So I believe I sat through the exact same hearings and presentations. And I just want to say that my takeaway on some of this was a little bit different. What I heard from MDHHS during the hearings and the testimony was that they were verifying all of these things that you are now reporting aren't verified, including citizenship and
Well, Representative
need. And
Cernigu,
I just want to make my comment, and then you can certainly respond. I know we had some challenges with unemployment that we were working through, but I did hear very different things in those hearings, that we were not relying on self-attestation, and while there are certainly improvements that could be done to a website, the websites were not the way that people were registered, and there was follow-up and communication before people were approved from any of these benefits. There is fraud going on that came out through those hearings from scam artists, and I think that is something that we should address, and I believe you are starting to look into that. And by scam artists, I don't mean users or people who are trying to sign up to use benefits, but people who are, taking those at, at the card readers or at businesses and then taking advantage. And I hope that we do pursue that route. I did not perceive from any of the testimony the widespread user fraud that you are now reporting on, and I would actually go as far as saying I don't agree with any of the numbers, and no one verified those numbers in any of those hearings that you have now put
Can I answer,
forth.
please?
But I do have a question for you, and that is, I know you've made a proposal that we add chips, pictures, and signatures, and I am wondering if there's a fiscal analysis and what the cost of that would be. I don't necessarily think that it addresses the problem, but if we did do it, I'm curious how much that would cost.
Sure.
Just one second. Something I just wanted to remind everybody on here. So this is a presentation of what we've done in these subcommittees. It's not a determination on future policy. It's not a determination on what those reports might look like coming out on policy. So I don't want to get into the weeds on what we think we're going to do tomorrow to fix this. And I'm only saying that because this is an update to us. These are ongoing things. These are moving targets. All of your input, very valuable, which all should be taken into consideration when we move on that policy at some point in the future. So with that, Representative Wolford, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, then we're going to move to another question. Just in the interest of time, we got to move quick.
Thank you. So I guess this is a very big difference between you and I. I don't see $10 billion as a discrepancy. I find it an absolute disgusting waste of people who work very hard. So I wouldn't use that word discrepancy if it were I. As it relates to what you heard in the committee, you might want to go back and listen to the committee and look at the reports from the OIG because those numbers are in there. Sometimes we're busy and you may not have heard what was there, but further investigation from the OIG shows that those numbers in fact are there. And as it relates to further legislation, which we won't talk about, I can say this, whatever the cost is, it's definitely not $3 billion that we've wasted over the last 13 years and not having proper organization. So thank you for the questions. I appreciate it.
Representative Wolford, appreciate the information. Thanks for the update. Keep up the good work. Keep looking, keep digging. People of the state of Michigan, the taxpayers appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
We're going to move to Representative Bierlein, Chair of Public Health and Food Security. Representative Bierlein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the opportunity to talk about what we've been doing in the Subcommittee on Public Health and Food Security. We've kind of touched on 4 areas so far over the course of this year. We've talked on an OAG report regarding the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. We've talked about MPHI, the Michigan Public Health Institute. We've talked about physician shortages and differences in what's causing physician shortages and burnout in the state of Michigan. And then we've spent the vast majority of our time talking about our state's mental health system and support services. And so I'll just go in chronological order with the way that we did in the committee. So the first one was the Liquor Control Commission. This has been this was brought up actually last term in Oversight, where there was a OAG report where 35% of the state's spirits inventory, or about $1 billion worth of state-owned product, had been unaccounted for. That was explained to us in a way that it has to do with their tracking system. They don't know that those bottles were actually ever lost or not lost, but the way that the system tracks inventory and the way that inventory is counted and how fast it's counted, sometimes bottles can come, be sold, and moved out before the system has had a chance to track them. So it can show up as it was here, and then it's not here, and then maybe it was here. To fix that, the MLCC started a new inventory software program called SIPS Plus to solve those tracking problems. It was supposed to be up and running last year in November. At time of testimony, it had not yet been up and running. And it is running at a cost overrun of a couple $1 million for that system. But there's more to come, and hopefully it'll be up and running, and we won't have these issues moving forward pretty soon. The Michigan Public Health Institute is an area that I think I'd like to spend some more time covering later. I'd like to go back to this, or maybe it's just having full oversight, ask some questions. But the institution was set up by the legislature in the 1980s with the mission to serve as a bridge between the Department of Health and Human Services, I know that wasn't the name in the 1980s, and the state's flagship research universities. And the idea was to create this kind of bridge that could apply for federal grant funding that the department as a governmental agency and then these state institutions were not able to secure on their own. When we brought the department director in and asked what some of those research projects were, none were actually able to be named in the committee. And what we found is that they have around 600 employees that they call affiliates who work exclusively on DHHS jobs. And so we're just not sure that that's what it was intended to do or be for. And when a large portion of the funding comes directly from the state and then federal grants to conduct research, but the folks that are working there are just working on DHHS projects, and the board chair for MPHI is the director of the department. We're just wondering how much of that original mission statement is being followed. And so something we'd like to look more into and maybe get more information on in the future. On doctor shortages and licensing burdens, this was something that had come up to me personally through talking with physicians locally and different groups in the Saginaw, Genesee County area. It's been brought up repeatedly that Michigan has a high rate of physician burnout, and we also have a high rate of physicians who are ready or approaching retirement age. And one of the things that gets brought up is just the amount of administrative burden that physicians have. Instead of spending time seeing patients, they're spending more time doing paperwork, they're spending more time doing continuing education. And so we just really wanted to talk about that system, what it looks like, and are there changes that can be made. I think there's going to be some legislation introduced as actually a result of that, talking about our CME requirements. Just as an example, physicians in Michigan are required to have 50 hours of CME every year. In Ohio, it's 25. But we're part of a physician compact that allows Ohio physicians to practice in Michigan. We don't require them to meet the same standards that we require our Michigan physicians. And yet we don't have any different patient outcomes when somebody from Ohio comes up here and practices. So if we're going to be part of this compact and we're going to allow physicians in and out across state lines, why are we requiring so much more of the folks who are licensed here in Michigan? Additionally, we rank second in the nation for the number of sanctions placed on our medical licenses, and we have some of the most burdensome requirements. So we're punishing our doctors for wanting to practice here, and so I'm anticipating some legislation coming out of those hearings, and looking forward to continuing to work towards better solutions there. The next issue, and this is where we've really spent most of our time, is the state's behavioral health system. It seems like we were really exhaustive on this, and yet we probably could have had twice as many committee hearings just on this subject. Michigan currently ranks 47th in the nation for our psychiatric bed availability. The recommended standard is 30 to 40 beds for every 100,000 residents, and Michigan has only 19, with the majority of those beds being private, or private beds, not state beds. The state actually has about 5 beds per 100,000 residents. And then, you know, you get north of Bay City, and that is a particularly underserved area, with the UP being almost a bed desert. It's not just about physical beds, though. It's also about staffing. We do have a facility in Saginaw that operates about half capacity because they don't have enough staffing. So it's a multifaceted issue. Some issues came up. There's some things that we saw during these committees where there was definitely room for some policy improvement in how beds are utilized, how beds are designated, who can be in a type of bed. And additionally, what we really found was that because of the lack of service, folks who need mental health assistance and help are winding up in other systems throughout the state, utilizing those resources and then still not getting the help they need. So we had testimony from Grand Traverse County. So 38% of inmates showed clear signs of behavioral health and substance abuse issues. So we're spending state resources, and then folks aren't getting the help that they need. And so then we wind up spending those same state resources over and over again. We have really long wait times. When folks do get admitted to like an ER room because of mental health conditions, they have a hard time finding a placement for folks. And that is where I would say we saw the difference between the private beds and the state beds. The folks who have the most severe cases, a lot of private institutions they're not equipped to handle those individuals. They don't necessarily have the staff or the training or the bed space available for the highest need folks. And so those folks would be the candidate for a state bed, and that's where the lack of state beds really comes into play. And then we continued to hear from residents throughout the state and practitioners of just, you know, how hard it is to get into these facilities. Adolescent beds are very underserved, especially in northern Michigan. But then we get into certain times of the year, summertime, for instance, where adolescent beds have less need, and they can't use those bed spaces for adult beds, because once they've been made an adolescent bed, you can't convert it back to an adult bed. And so I think we're compiling a full report of all of this that we'll deliver to every member of this committee. We've been collecting information from the rest of the committee members just to make sure that, you know, kind of the things that they thought they wanted included in the report, or the things that they thought were the most important, we can make sure that we get it in there, as well as minutes from all of the testimony we heard. But we can do better. I believe the resources are there if we use them appropriately, and look forward to continuing to work on this.
Thank you, Representative Bierlein. It is interesting. I've had some similar conversations with sheriffs and with emergency room professionals about the fact that the mental health treatment that's available in the state of Michigan is landing in the county jails, and it's landing in the emergency rooms. So I do appreciate you digging on that and working into it, because I think it's horribly underserved in the state of Michigan to the degree that we need it. And the resources that we are spending on it are not resources to help the individuals that are in need. It's just almost more of just a babysitting in a jail and in an emergency room. And that's costing not only taxpayers, it's costing those emergency rooms, which is ultimately driving up the cost of providing that service, because they're receiving little or no pay for that service to those individuals when they're coming in. So thank you for that. We do have a question. Representative Menser.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair Bierlein. So I just need to wrap my mind around this. You know, maybe I'm not the smartest person on earth, but the Michigan Public Health Institute was created to work with universities to further research, right? They have over 600 employees, and yet they cannot identify one single project that they're working on. Is that correct?
During committee, the director was unable to name a research project they were working on.
If I could say a bad word on I
Well,
would.
I'd prefer you not.
I believe, I'm sure that given time, they could provide us with a list, but at committee, they were unable to identify any projects that they are working on.
And I hope that your oversight committee is going to continue to pursue that?
I've been discussing that with Chair DeBoyer.
Got it.
Thank you, Representative Menser. Representative Cerniglu.
Thank you. So I guess I have two things now based on Rep. Menser's question. So first of all, this isn't really a question. I just really want to say thank you, and I agree with these mental health issues in the criminal justice system. When I was a court-appointed attorney, this just came up time and time again, and the amount of money that we could be saving if we were directing it properly. Criminalizing mental health issues just has been an ongoing problem. So I'm really happy that this committee, and I'm on this committee, is addressing all of those issues. I am trying to remember the MPHI hearing, and I do believe I remember they weren't able to name anything, but did I name a couple programs during that hearing? I feel like I had looked it up.
I think you looked it up and
it
were able
was
to name some.
online.
Yeah.
At which point they said there is a listing that we could look at online. So it looks like they certainly have programs they're working on. Maybe we just need to have the right person testifying on what they are.
I would have
So
thought the director would have been the right person to name that.
I can't comment on any of that, but thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cerniglu. If there's no further questions, we are going to move to Representative Bruck, Homeland Security Foreign Influence update. Representative Bruck, as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee members for spending your time this morning listening to me. I know I'm not the most cultured or well-dressed individual in this room, but however, I am wearing a tie today for this hearing. Let it be noted. As you can see, each oversight committee takes on a different flavor. And that happens to be the flavor of the committee chair. And each of us have different passions and different experiences in the Homeland Security and foreign influence arena. I have a particular set of skills that I think certainly enables me to look into what we're looking into, which is Homeland Security and foreign influence here in the state of Michigan. I would certainly put myself up there as one of the most experienced members in the legislature in this area of Homeland Security with a vast knowledge of multinational efforts against multinational threats around the world. And so our committee seeks solutions, and that has been my plan in this committee, is looking into this area and coming up with different solutions on how we can address it as a state. These have been done through letters of recommendation, letters of concern, and vetting bill concepts. Notwithstanding, I want to also, I need to thank my committee members, Majority Vice Chair Meerman and Minority Vice Chair Menser, as well as Rep. Shriver and Rep. Collin, and then as well as Catherine and Omar and Casey and all their support that they've been during these committees, and the backroom support as well. We are kind of a unique hybrid committee looking at these issues. We have met 11 times thus far. addressing issues of border security, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and drones/cyber issues. Our first hearing was from retired General Doug Slocum, really highlighting, giving us a 30,000-foot view of the security of Michigan from his perspective as a retired Air Force general. And then we went on to borders, customs, and trafficking in that area. One thing, I did meet personally with the Customs and Borders. They would not, they are planning on coming to a committee eventually, but at the time they would not. But they confirmed, our northern border is very loosely protected. And there's a lot of issues, a lot of things coming through, such as illegal trafficking, almost as much as, our southern border to a degree, as well as items, mostly items is what they said, products, drugs, not necessarily the human trafficking aspect of it as we see with the southern border, but those other items. We had Sheriff Bouchard present in our committee addressing organized crime issues in his community and in the state of Michigan. And eventually we will be talking border security with the Customs and Border Patrol as well. We had 3 hearings on drug trafficking, fentanyl, the main issue. Sheriff Bouchard came to our committee. He testified that most of these items, this fentanyl, is being brought over from overseas, and most likely, as we see in federal studies, China. By the way of manufacturing these precursors to fentanyl in countries such as China, it's legal to manufacture these precursors, but it's illegal to sell those same things in China, but they are shipped overseas. We did discuss pill presses and fentanyl-laced pills. We had various testimony. We had Chuck Height, the sheriff of Berrien County, giving similar figures and facts as Sheriff Bouchard did as well, discussing the cases in his county. We did have the chief medical officer of Michigan, Dr. Natasha Bagdasarian, very knowledgeable lady, incredible testimony. Some of the testimony in our committee scared the bejesus out of you when you listen to these folks and what's really going on that we are not aware of. She did talk about synthetic opioid overdoses have risen from 39% to 72% of all the overdoses in 2023, and that 90% of ecstasy pills are also laced with fentanyl in the state of Michigan. Pretty sobering. Both of the sheriffs talked about pill presses, so that was one item that we are working on as well. Human trafficking, we had Sheriff Troy Goodenough come up and talk about his task force Viper, which is combating human trafficking here in Michigan. And through our testimony, we talked about the events, the big events around the country that draw sex trafficking to it. And one of those being, the largest being like NFL, Super Bowl, as well as here in Detroit this last year, the NFL draft, over 100 interactions per day with sexual traffickers from those groups operating, trying to catch these jokers. We heard from the Human Trafficking Division at the Michigan State Police. Here, they talked about the amount of human trafficking in the state. Michigan is somewhat unique in that 55% of humans trafficked are male versus 45% female. And that is because Michigan has a large labor trafficking operation going on, as well as there's a lot of sex trafficking going on as well. But typically the males are trafficked for labor on our truck farms and such here in the state, big agricultural operations here in Michigan. And then we hit cyber and drones. So we've had four hearings on drones specifically. This is really a big issue that I am trying to tackle. in that this is one of our biggest threats, I feel, to not just Michigan, but to the U.S., is the nefarious drones or nefarious drones used in a nefarious way that can cause chaos. So we did do a first ever drone flyover in the Michigan Capitol during one of our committees. You see the photo there afterward with Dakota Greenman from Westwood AI. He really was demonstrating the ability of drones to fly by and take video and interpret that video in certain ways. Drones, as I said, are a very real concern. We also held a drone symposium. It was not part of the committee outreach, but that it fed into the committee. Hearings have demonstrated how, and you can start that video as well. This is just a video of when he was doing the flyover, so that'll just play while I talk. So if you don't want to look at me, you can look at the video. It's a little better to look at. But we've had a lot of hearings demonstrating the backdoors that are in current drones throughout our country. Most of these drones were manufactured overseas, vast majority, about 90% being manufactured by one individual company in China, DJI. And at the federal level, they have determined that these backdoors are accessible from overseas. We had different experts come and present, Scott Schaffman, as well as Matt Rybar and others. And a lot of questions were asked on how easily drones can be weaponized. And we did see that even with TACOM, there was a very real threat of a weaponized drone that was intercepted. I should say not the drone was intercepted, but the plan was intercepted by the FBI. And we see a very vulnerable utility system and infrastructure system throughout our state, and these are issues that we're focusing on. Our committee hearings are vetting concepts of packages of bills to make Michigan more secure. My goal, personally, is to provide a method to increase the safety of Michigan in the Homeland Security and Foreign Influence arena and through the committee. Because, mark my words, there is an imminent threat here in Michigan and around the country from nefarious drones and nefarious actors. And when it comes to Homeland Security, that's my priority, that is my passion, and my job is to do my best to avoid the next 9/11 here in the U.S. is what can we do as a state? Who can we bring into our committee to give us the information in order for us to avoid catastrophe here and throughout the U.S.? And so that's really, my goal is to make our state more secure, in essence, making our country more secure. And these are the reasons we have the individuals coming to our committee. And certainly we're going to be focusing on drones and cybersecurity moving forward, and the foreign adversary influence reduction package that we're working on and vetting those bills through our committee, or those concepts, I should say. I'll take any questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. That was a great presentation, Representative Bruck. I appreciate that. Really quick, have you gotten into the discussion about the same issue as you talked about, backdoor access into some of these drones? Someone made me aware that the same thing exists in some of our medical equipment in hospitals.
Medical equipment in hospitals, servers and/or routers in our utilities systems. There's also been a number of reports. We're working on some presentations regarding like the solar. There's backdoors within the solar manufactured components as well. We see it in the harbors. They have made prohibitions against certain crane manufacturers because of those back doors. I mean, it's a very, very, very real thing. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for that. Representative Menzer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Bruck. So when we talk about security, in the last week, our jets have intercepted 3 Russian fighters in the Arctic zone. That was all over the news yesterday. 3. So it will be critically important for us to make sure that Selfridge has everything that it needs to protect us here in Michigan. Selfridge brings about $850 million of economic benefit to Southeast Michigan. The aerospace and defense industry in Michigan brings $30 to $31 billion of contracts. The aerospace industry is critically important to the safety of Michigan. So it is very important that we pay attention to not only what's going on here in Michigan, but those Russian fighter jets could come here too, couldn't they? Easily.
A lot harder than a drone, but yes, ma'am. No, I appreciate that. Odie Slocum did point that out with the F-15EXs
EX.
coming to Selfridge. You know, and one of our jobs is to vet, how do we protect those? How do we protect that investment? How do we protect our own means of protecting ourselves? And, you know, we've noticed in the news lots of different things in Ukraine where a handful of drones take out irreplaceable billions of dollars worth of, you know, strategic bombers and other planes in Russia. So it's, you know, how do we protect our airports? What can we do? And that's part of, you know, my passion, obviously. We're a little different, unique committee in oversight and how we operate. But, you know, we have fun at times. But, you know, we're hard-hitting, but also very, very hard lifting is really my plan, and how we can make ourselves more safer and protect our state.
And so one of the really cool things is when we were at Northern Strike, I dragged Jake, I forget his last name, Speaker Hall's staffer, over to the display for drone jammers. There are two different levels, the level that the state can get, but there is a big-ass one that the feds have, and I'd like to see us get something like that. I mean, it was absolutely impressive, and I have been begging for them to come in and present that in our committee.
Yeah,
We may be able to get a swear jar for you, Rep. Menser, and fund roads with it possibly.
I only said it once today.
Yeah,
I appreciate your comments on that, and I couldn't agree more on Selfridge with you. That's right on the money. Representative Bruck, I appreciate your testimony on this topic. Interest of time, we got to move along. Great work on this. Keep it up. Look forward to some of your summaries as you move forward through this stuff. Next, we are going to hear from Representative Cara. Last but not least, corporate subsidies and state investments. Representative Cara, when you're ready, I would ask you to be 1 degree faster than normal and move through your presentation so we don't delay everybody. Thanks, Rep. Cara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for having me here for this presentation today. As the subcommittee chair of corporate subsidies and state investments, I will go through now and share with you what we have talked about so far. It has been wide viewpoints, bringing in all the way to the MEDC to hear their perspectives. We give them the time, thorough, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes up to an hour. I think even one time that they testified, we had to cut them off so we could get to Q&A. But I do appreciate the fact that they come in and they have the open conversations, and there has been good feedback, bipartisan feedback in terms of reviewing these corporate handouts that the state of Michigan is receiving. I first want to talk about mega credits, and then we'll get into the SOAR fund programs after that. The mega credits intent was to stimulate job creation and retention through W-2 certificated tax credits. Essentially what that means is these businesses, they either with job creation or eventually what became retention of jobs are able to capture back the money that would go to the Treasury and be part of what funds our state government to have that money returned to their company, getting a special deal with the W-2s from those employees who they get contracted to have that money come back to them instead of going to the state of Michigan. To be clear, I want less taxes paid by the businesses and or their employees. I love to see that for them as long as it's a unilateral deal across the board for all businesses, not picking winners and losers. What we've seen from the mega credits is a $9.4 billion total liability for the life of the program, which began in 1995 and is set to expire in 2030. There's no new contracts that are being created, but there are some contracts that are still in existence, just a handful, with about $2 billion in tax credits remaining for less than the 10 benefiting companies. A solution that we proposed was House Bill 4186, and that passed through the House earlier this year. The concept would be that they would pay the corporate income tax like other companies is what they would probably want to do. If they would want to pay the Michigan business tax with the rise from 4.95% up to 30%, they could, and then the 0.8% of gross receipts, but then they could get their certificated credits if they still want them, or they can just be treated like all other companies and pay the flat 6% low level. That's much more basic, which makes a lot of sense. Moving on to the SOAR programs, which is the Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve. We have the Goshen EV battery plant, which was 2,350 jobs promised with uncertainty delivered. Although this was smaller dollar amounts in terms of the SSRP grants and the planned $175 million, what we still see is environmental concerns, lack of support from the community. Small want their way of life without these special deals coming in, impacting and altering the community in which they live in such a substantial way. And then also a big highlight from Goshen was the foreign influence. Goshen Incorporated is tied to the Chinese entity Goshen High Tech, and no CFIUS review was conducted. The CCP wanted this project for espionage, is a concern we heard in talking with former Ambassador Joe Sella. Appreciated his testimony as well as others to look into this. And the CFIUS review is it's a committee on foreign influence and investment review. When there's potential risks to our country, it's good to make sure that that is done to ensure that we have safety with them being in our backyard. Moving on to the Marshall mega site, that was 2,500 jobs originally promised with uncertainty delivered. Higher dollar amounts, looking at $149 million, almost $150 million in SSRP grants, $1.054 billion planned incentive package. Problem here, like with the other transparency, the community is in the dark, and then all of a sudden it's on their community, and it came out of nowhere, and there's nothing they could do through the deliberation process to protect their community from having this infiltration, essentially, which it's very interesting because you would think if you're getting millions and millions of dollars pouring in, hundreds of millions or $1 billion plus pouring into your community at the expense of the rest of the state, that if that's coming to one business in your community and it's going to trickle down and help the local community, that'd be something the community would want. But when the community themselves don't even want these projects, and it's the state of Michigan and or federal money that goes to these programs, it just shows that there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse here, and it's actually doing a disservice to the community. They would rather not have it. And non-disclosure agreements signed, so that's another problem with the transparency with these projects. The last one is on Monday Mega Site. We just started testimony on this last week. We'll have more testimony again tomorrow, and expecting beyond tomorrow. There was 3,000 to 6,000 permanent jobs promised. The letter of intent was closer to 7,000 to 9,000. Uncertainty delivered there as well with the recent news of SanDisk pulling out from the agreement. There was $250 million in SSRP grants that were awarded a couple years ago for that project. And we just see, again, this could be the blight of tomorrow, using taxpayers' dollars to start a project that may not come to fruition. And if it does come to fruition, it oftentimes under-delivers. According to the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, only 1 out of 11 projects or jobs promised actually materialize. 123,000 promised jobs, only 10,889 delivered from major state deals in recent decades in the state of Michigan, just further showing the failure of these economic decisions that are being made. The last thing I want to get into is the MEDC raid. On June 5th, Chair DeBoyer and I sent a letter requesting documentation on the $20 million grant awarded by the MEDC to Faye Beydoun. The Attorney General's office raided the MEDC on June 18th after our letter was publicly shared with the media. Court filings confirmed the raid was prompted by our request. The raid delayed our access to key documents pertaining to the grant, and 2 days ago on Sunday, we received unredacted documents and are reviewing the information. And by we, I haven't seen it yet, but our team finally received it over the weekend, so looking forward to digging into that further. In conclusion, corporate welfare schemes are ineffective means of economic development. Time and time again, these deals prove to be void of transparency, full of corruption, and an utterly wasteful allocation of taxpayer dollars that destroy local communities. Michigan's fundamental approach to economic development is in dire need of significant change, and legislation is being considered to have more transparency on these projects. For example, when the MSF is the one that, or the Michigan Strategic Fund is the one who approves these corporate handouts, and then essentially the MEDC. And then they're the ones who verify these certificated credits are up to speed and going out properly. And then Treasury just rubber stamps and pushes out the certificated credit back to the company. And we can't see information. They say that there's proprietary information, but we don't need to see every single employee's social security number and how much they're getting paid exactly. But seeing the high-level dollar amounts from each of these companies who are benefiting from taxpayer-funded certificated credits is something that would be abundantly appropriate. Another thing we're looking into potentially is not having double dipping with corporate handouts. An idea with that would be if you're receiving some type of corporate benefit or taxpayer-funded assistance in the state of Michigan, you're only allowed to receive one. You can't double dip and receive a local tax abatement and then go and get a certificated credit and then get SOAR welfare funding and so on and so forth, all the way up to considering legislation to abolish the MEDC. We've seen that it's been an adjunct failure in the state of Michigan, and we need to reassess our economic future for our state. With that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Representative Carr. That was rather informative. I look forward to further information as you dig through these things. It's good information to know as we make legislative decisions in the state of Michigan with how our tax dollars are spent. So thanks for your work on that. Really appreciate the information. Representative Wagala.
I just wanted to, well, first say thanks to the chair. I think we've been doing some interesting stuff in committee, but also with the Money Township site, I don't know if you said it, but that offer from the state of Michigan was $6.24 billion. And the math that I've done is that would be, that we have about 33,000 homeless people in the state of Michigan. That's enough to essentially buy a $180,000 house for each of them if you divided it up. So I just want to highlight how ridiculous some of these offers have been and look forward to investigating this more.
Absolutely, whether it is having more funding, like you would argue, for our schools or healthcare or government expenditures, or putting more money into taxpayers' pockets to spend as they see fit. Whatever we would do, arguably, anything would be better than giving these special deals to corporations that others don't also receive. And it's been a very welcomed reality to join with different perspectives and have a bipartisan look, not at bipartisanship for corruption in the status quo, but bipartisanship of tackling the corruption of these policies. So enjoyed working with you so far.
Representative Wolford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative. So MEDC, they get a pot of money given to them. And what was the statistic that you said they create? How many jobs, one job out of, what was that?
It's one out of 11 according to the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. And that's just for major state deals from 2000 to 2020. The numbers were 123,060 promised jobs with only 10,889 actually delivered.
Wow, so you have they have roulette has a better chance than they do of creating business. Thank you, appreciate you.
Let the market run its course, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point, Representative Wolford. It's, in the private sector, when you have to actually earn your money, that would be known as a bankrupt policy. So if there's nothing further, appreciate your testimony, Representative Carr. Appreciate all the chair's testimony. Very informative. I'm glad you were able to put this together for us today. There being no further business before the committee, the Oversight Committee will stand adjourned.